Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why. Good evening and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am your co host, Jocelyn Turner. As I often say, it's a lovely day in Northeast Florida. Hopefully, wherever you are tuning in, it's a lovely day for you as well. Although we've had some ups and downs in the weather, like I found myself, Dr. Kane wanted to pull out some winter clothes a few days ago, but it looks like we're getting better. How are you doing this evening, Dr. Kane?
I'm doing fine, and I love winter clothes. You can't, I can always take clothes off if it gets too hot, but um, I just can't take but so much off before they call the police. So won't take much.
OMG.
I really enjoyed the weather, because I kind of like my lawn getting watered, and you know, but if there's an indication in terms of the amount of rain that was dumped in one day over at my office, in one little shower period, that's an indication where we hear what we headed into this year for hurricane season. I might be in trouble.
I know, right? Well, we are fortunate, Dr. Kane, that we have two folks joining us tonight who I think spend most of their days wondering what hurricane season is going to look like and how to not only ready themselves and their families, but also help to ready our community. And that's the way I say it, ready our community, right? We
Right.
have joining us tonight Eli Darkatch. Hopefully I did not botch Eli's name, from Feeding Northeast Florida. How you doing this evening, Eli?
I'm doing great. How about you, Jocelyn?
Just peachy. Just peachy. Thank you. Also joining us is Jennifer Sylvie, also known as Disaster
Disaster
Jen.
Jen.
There's a story behind that, and I can't wait to learn about it. How are you doing this evening,
Yes.
Disaster Jen?
I am great. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Oh, absolutely. And so tonight, for our audience, we are discussing hurricane preparedness and are you ready? I can tell you, having worked at the health department more than 36 years, I heard story after story after story of people who were not prepared. I was looking at the predictions for this summer, this hurricane season, I should say, and
Yeah.
it says 12 to 17 total named storms in 2023. Now, if you think about it, hurricane season is how many months? 6 months?
About that. Yeah.
And you think about 12 to 17, that's more than two storms per month. So,
Yep.
wow, 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 wow. Disaster Jen, why do you think people just don't prepare for hurricanes? Do you think it's because they don't believe that it's coming?
It's never going to happen here. The last one was in 1964. Oh, we're inverted here in Jacksonville. It's never going to happen here.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'll say, they'll always say, well, it never happened here. We're already one storm in to that prediction. Over the weekend, you were talking about the cold weather. Well, there was this nice little storm running up our coast, but up through the Carolinas, that actually became one of the storms that will be put on that short list for hurricane season. And I'll tell you, the night my husband was born in 1964 was the night Dora did pretty much a direct hit to Jacksonville. And every year I hear the excuses. Well, I was ready and nothing happened. And so it doesn't matter. I think that people will give you excuses because they just have it in their mind that it's just not going to happen. And we can't stay in that mind shift. We have to start shifting that thinking about being prepared.
And people, especially people with all of us, need to be prepared, of course. But those persons, for example, who are special needs, who have medical
Yeah.
issues, I know a few people who are on dialysis, for instance. Hopefully, they have a plan, Jen, for their families in the event a storm does come by, because they may lose their electricity, and
Yep.
normal, and even people with who sleep with oxygen or who have
Yep.
CPAP machines. Those are the people that I think about, don't you?
Oh, so I worry most about them. And the great thing about, our great city, because we live in such a resource wealthy type city, is that our Duval Emergency Preparedness Unit, which is in the it's downtown. It's ran by a great group of folks. They have already been meeting and reaching out to folks who sign up to be at these special needs shelters. But the key is you have to sign up each year to put your name on the list to be at a shelter, to be at a special needs shelter. Because if you are requiring oxygen or any type of other medical equipment, you need to go to these medical special needs shelter and pre-register and put your name on that list. They even help with transportation. But those conversations, you said it earlier, those conversations with families have to occur now, not the day of the storm.
And by the way, if you don't know, hurricane season is June 1st to November 30th, just in case you don't know. Go ahead, Dr. Kane.
But Jennifer, because that brings to mind, as a provider, as a physician,
Yes, sir. Yep.
What can we do? What is in place for us to start advising our patients exactly what you just said? Because there's no better place sometimes than a captive audience when they're stuck in the room with me for a few minutes that I can, deliver a message about whatever. And so I'm not sure what the city has done to reach out to physicians. Did they reach out to Duval County Medical Society, the Hispanic Medical Association, Northeast? These various people that where physicians congregate at times, or at least they can make physicians aware of what's available and what they need to be talking about. I'm not sure of a structured program for that. So help guide me in terms of, if it's my office, what do I need to do? What can I do?
Sure. I'll tell you right now, one of the best resources you have is to go into the COJ website. On that website, you can type in the search bar, medical special needs shelter or storm sheltering. And it will give you now a website that we direct community members to go in and register. Now, I believe there's also a telephone number just in case, because not everybody has a computer, right?
Right.
There should be a telephone number there as well. But that website, the COJ website, and it's under their emergency preparedness department. It's called EPD. It has a direct link to register patients, or give to the families to register their patient or their family member.
Okay, because as you say, a lot of the older folks who may or may not have a family close by. I just want to be able to let them know that when the time comes, here's what we need to do. So
and the time is now. So the time is now to register.
Agreed.
Yeah.
To register. After I get off this broadcast, the thing that I have to make sure of is I got to remember exactly what I can do to assist my patients. So I guess I need to, the first thing you would tell me would be go to coj.net and look up hurricane preparedness, right?
Yep, correct. And I'll tell you what I'll do too. After this broadcast, I'll send you the direct link as well, and you can have that and share that link. And I'll make sure that I put you in contact with the right people if you have any further questions.
So Jen, is jacksready.com still active? Because I know that was a site I used to access long ago.
I will tell you, for people who have, Androids or iPhone, this is a free app. You can be anywhere in Jacksonville You can just, it follows whatever you're at right then and there. It will tell you any shelters are nearby, any road closures, any evacuation zones or flood zones from that spot that you're at. And you can put in your home address as well. And it will also give you the shelters information.
I think one
So
of the things,
Eli, I was about to say, I'm about to bring you in, Eli, but go ahead.
I was going to say some of the things that Jack's Ready is great for is if you want to register any vulnerable missing persons that someone tends to wander in your family and you need to get them to return home. You can do that annually on Revamp Duval, which is part of Jack's Ready, which is a great resource as well. They do a lot of stuff on that resource. They do preparedness and response and recovery and prevention and mitigation, all these different ways to get text alerts and how to build emergency supply kit or lots of ways to report damage and so forth. So I definitely recommend for the general population that your friends and family, anyone you know, to get that app on your phone or check out that website.
I just did it. I just put the, as you guys were talking, I downloaded it on my phone, and I'm going like, whoa.
There you go.
I should have known about this earlier. I'm Miss Turner and Tyrone pick at me because I'm one of those guys that's a runner. You know, when the hurricanes come in this direction, see you, bye, I'm gone.
And so let me say about that is, it's not just you that's saying that. There's a million people that want to get on the highways or on the roads, and that causes a huge backup. So one of the things that I like to suggest, when and any time now, you should be getting in the mail the City of Jacksonville Emergency Preparedness Hurricane Guide. That guide has so many great resources. But one of the things that I encourage people to do is know your zones. Know what evacuation zone you're in. If you're in a zone, especially in a flood zone, that it is definitely going to be evacuated or definitely gets flooded. Some of the things I suggest, if you don't go to a special needs shelter, go to a friend's house or a family's house in another zone that isn't in the high risk area zones. So it's always good to go there, kind of go that short distance instead of getting on the road. Because we used to head up to South Carolina, where my family's from, and we would sit on that highway for hours and hours and hours when I could have just gone to my cousin's house that's on the other side of town that probably wouldn't get affected as much or wouldn't be in one of those high risk zones. So know your zones and know your flood zones.
And I agree with you. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Eric. Eli, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's great advice. A lot of people don't evacuate because they think it's going to be a long trip ahead of them. But if they just look at what zones are being evacuated, they don't have to take that long trip. But it's important to take it seriously from the local officials, especially if you're in that mandatory zone, as early as possible, because those roads may be inaccessible due to water and debris and hazards and all that kind of fun stuff. And the zones that are evacuated, you want to think about city services like garbage collections might be delayed. So that's something to think about too. That you don't want to stick around when they're not going to be able to get your garbage either.
So Eli, you're with Feeding Northeast Florida. What's your role in preparedness from Feeding Northeast Florida perspective?
Yeah, it's a passion of mine as far as helping out in times of disaster. Basically, we cover a 12-county service area, not just Jacksonville or Duval County. And so we have 3 facilities, one in Gainesville and 2 in Jacksonville currently, with 85 staff and 85,000 square feet and a fleet of over 15 trucks. Right now, in non-disaster times, we're distributing 30 million pounds of food a year to nonprofits to make sure that they have the food to stock their shelves and so forth. Excuse me. But when you think about disaster, you have all these people that are already struggling. That the disaster time multiplies that effect. They're already a vulnerable population, whether it be seniors or kids that have maybe a lower immune systems, that access to food and the resources they need are that much harder and scarce to get, which makes it a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we partner with not only the county level emergency management teams, but also our state and national associations that direct resources where they need to go. That could be bottled water and MREs, which is meals ready to eat, or just emergency food and supplies and that kind of thing. So it's really important that we're a supplemental organization for the first responders to make sure that food and supplies get where they need to go quickly.
I always tell people, Eli, I'm sorry, Dr. Kane, I always tell people, Eli, or I have in the past, and it's time for me to say it again, not just wait for the season of giving, but that Feeding Northeast Florida accepts donations all the time. Some organizations are looking for fundraising opportunities, and to hear 39 million pounds of food, that means that we should all consider Feeding Northeast Florida in our giving campaigns, right? As we want to donate money. So I can't help but give that plug, Eli. You didn't ask me to do that. I had to put that out there myself to hear 39 million pounds of food. That's a lot.
But while you're at it, how do we help? How and what should we encourage our audience and ourselves to donate to Northeast Florida?
So that's a great point. You mentioned before that hunger is not just a holiday issue; it's a year-round issue. People are hungry all throughout the year, and it's not just a homeless issue either. The majority of folks that are in line for food assistance are renters. You probably have a tough time making ends meet with their regular paychecks. The expenses have increased already, and there's with fuel and with medical expenses and utilities and everything else. Sometimes it's hard to get food on the table, especially nutritious food for your family and loved ones. So we make sure that our network of nonprofits is that safety net to help people get back on their feet.
And so stuff you look at as non-perishable type foods, right?
Yeah. So typically when you think about a disaster, a lot of times there's power outages. So the types of food we're typically distributing are the non-perishable, shelf-stable product. But anytime we receive perishable food in our coolers and freezers, that's typically coming from food industry donors like grocery stores and distribution centers, not from individuals. But I will say in times of disaster, it's really important not to clog up the supply chain of sending products when it's not requested. Typically they'll add, the impacted area will put out specific requests for needed items, and in that situation, it's okay to send those specific items, but if it's not requested, don't send it because you're going to make it the problem worse than better. What they need more than anything else is volunteers, and they need financial assistance to be able to spend dollars specifically on needs as they develop.
So I'm looking at a video here that we have been shown, thanks to our behind the scenes guy putting this up front. I'm new to, let's say I'm new to Feeding Northeast Florida, don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do I just go to the website and look and see how to help? Or
actually on your screen you're looking at right now, if you want to put that back up again, there is a drop down called Get Help. That if you click on that drop down, it'll tell you what food pantries are in your area, what agencies are in your area, what their open hours are, what days of the week. So it's kind of
outstanding.
It directs anyone who needs food assistance where to go, basically. But
it also tells you that get involved. What is that one?
That's if you want to like volunteer or sponsor or something along those lines. How to engage with our organization. Whether it be
what I did was food and fund drives. I just sent a link out to my group, and rather than collecting foods, we collected money. We said we want to buy food for a family or what have you. And the point of this whole conversation, though, is when a storm is, as you say, people are vulnerable already as far as food insecurity goes. And when a storm happens, the reality is that people are going to be even more challenged, right?
Yep.
And so having the infrastructure, which sounds like what Jen was saying, that we're in a city that has a lot of resources, but the key is planning ahead. And that's what people tend not to do. When Eli was talking, I was thinking about how people, when the pandemic happened and everybody was going buying up the toilet paper and buying up, essential things. But
Very
really,
bad.
people need to plan for their families. And what do they say, for a week is what you should have enough supplies on hand for?
I would definitely do a week to 2 weeks, but you need a gallon of water a day for every person, correct, in your household.
And
so
your
building
pets.
And your pets. I'm gonna tell you, because my big dog, she'll drink a lot of water. But some of the things I tell people too, because we still have a lot of people who on septic tanks, right? And if your power goes out, your septic tank don't work. So I remind people, community people, fill up those bathtubs. Use that water in the bathtub if you have a septic tank to help flush your toilets. Because if you lose power, that's not going to happen.
So
but go ahead.
I was going to ask. So you saying, because we do the water and stuff in our bathtub. We're not on septic tank,
right?
But it's something that I grew up with. I learned from early childhood, and so I do it automatically now. If I stay, and so I just run it. So I just want to make sure people understand, if you're on city water, city electricity, the whole 9 yards, do you or don't you fill up that bathtub?
So I'm just gonna bring a little hospital into this, right? Because I'm the disaster manager at the hospital. So you got to think about that bathtub. Is that bathtub clean? You gonna drink that water? So I would highly suggest getting those big fillable tanks, like big plastic bottles. Fill those up. Now, if you don't have access,
many Floridians are already.
If you, I was about to say,
Tyrone showing these videos.
Hi, Tyrone. But if you don't have access to that and that's all you got, then that's all you got, right? But I would definitely think about it if you have a septic tank and you don't have electricity, because that septic tank, that toilet's not going to flush, and you're going to need some sort of water to help flush that. But you got to build that kit now. Part of that kit is your family disaster plan. Right. And if you think about, families or maybe older folks that are by themselves and their kids and grandkids live off another place, I encourage everyone to get out there. And I'll tell you, the Red Cross has a great family disaster plan. You can get that, print it out, write it in. But this plan is not just about hurricanes. It's about anything could happen. But we'll say hurricanes right now since it's hurricane season. But part of your disaster kit, your ready to go kit, is that plan. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? Here's a list of all your doctors. Here's a list of all your medications. Because I was deployed down to South Florida, and a lot of those homes weren't there. So people might have went to a shelter or left and came back. So all their important papers washed away. All their medication list, they didn't have. So having that disaster plan is so important.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the video where she's showing it's in a Ziploc bag, because obviously, even if you take it with you, you don't know what the conditions are going to be where you're going. So it's important to have your kit. When I worked at the health department, we always had to have we call it a go kit. Right? Ready kit, go kit, ready kit. I can't remember what it was. So just in case, because I worked in communications, I had to be ready. And I recall having to stay at the emergency operations center for 4 days, right? During that storm, that last big storm that we had here in Jacksonville. But I had to make sure that the elderly family members, that they were set, and my dog, right? To make sure that I had a plan for them. So you have to think about, depending upon what your job is, you may have to go to work. So you need to make sure your children, your elderly persons with special needs, they're taken care of. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about emergency preparedness. Are you ready? If you have questions of our guests, post it right now. As a matter of fact, someone asked me a question when I shared with people that we were doing the show, they said, I'm thinking about the 100-year flooding that's been
Ooh.
predicted. For those of us with retention ponds in our backyards, will we be responsible for damage to our homes? And what
Oh,
questions
wow.
should we be asking our homeowners associations?
Wow, those are great questions. And I actually heard some of those questions come up in another group that we met in. So I would do two things. One, I would get with those homeowners, right? The homeowner association. But I would also contact, especially if you live in a flood zone, I would specially contact your insurance company. What does that look like for me? You know, and the inside of your house. Take a picture of everything that's in your house, because if it gets flooded, you need those pictures. You know, go on the back of your TV, snap a little picture of the serial number, because that all becomes records. You know, I even went out and I tell people, I said, you know, I'm a cheapskate. Get one of those disposable cameras, take all the pictures, just hold on to that disposable camera, put it in your kit, put it in a Ziploc bag so that you always have it and you can go get it printed out. Because if something happens to your phone, you can't access your pictures, then you might not be in a good situation. But those are great questions. And I would definitely encourage people to get flood insurance. We saw it down in South Florida. They didn't have flood insurance and they lost everything.
You know, one of the things that, and speaking of, because I know the last time we did it, I went in video by way of my camera, my phone,
Yep.
video, you know, just walk from room to room and video everything, and then send it to myself in my email.
There you go.
Uh,
Perfect.
and so that I can access it from anywhere with anybody else's phone and so on and so on. It's a great
Yep.
idea to get the disposable camera, okay?
Yep.
And obviously we got all the Ziploc bags and you know that you can store paperwork in as
Yeah.
well. My family is in South Florida, and I know what they ran into. The problem is, man, and this is nothing that you guys can address when you talk about getting um, the insurance, the
Yep.
hurricane, I mean, you know, the homeowners insurance. Everyone is having a very difficult time these days in Florida because of the high risk state.
Yep.
And the one thing, and this is going to be a subject for another broadcast, but one of the, you know, after a disaster hit, and you start looking at what the homeowners insurance should and should not cover. Of course, they're not going to be your friends.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
you know, we want to make sure people understand that they have rights as it relates to what these homeowners insurance companies should not cover, should be covering, but may not want to cover because they're trying to save every dollar they can. And
Right.
so, and like I said, it's a topic for another show. But we need to come back and make sure we do revisit that topic, Ms. Turner, because people, it will happen, and when it
Yeah.
happens, sooner or later it will happen. I can't say it's this hurricane season or 10 hurricane seasons from now, but just like the last hurricane came along, another one can come along, and
Oh,
so we
yeah,
need to
most
be prepared
definitely.
from all ends. The next question I got is, so how much food should I put up again when it comes down to storing? What should I store? What kind of food should we put in place for the preparedness project?
Yeah, I would say to answer that question, you probably want to think about easy open items that you may not, but you're not probably not going to be able to cook using
Yep.
unless you have maybe a grill or something like that. So you want to think about peanut butter and jellies. You want to think about easy open cans, that kind of thing. If you don't have an easy open can, you have a can opener. It's a way to get to the product.
A hand crank can
Yeah, a hand
opener.
crank. It's good.
I remember those.
Yeah. But yeah, ideally, you want to think about items that can make a meal, but may not need to be cooked because you don't know what kind of power situations you're going to have.
Right.
I also learned recently a trick that you could put a coin on top of a frozen Dixie cup of water and put that in your freezer. And if that coin drops to the bottom, you know it's thawed. So let's say you evacuate and you come back to your house.
Wow.
And you don't know if there was a power outage or not just by looking at the food in your freezer. you should be able to see if there's freezer burn and that kind of thing. But that's a little trick I just learned recently. If you put a coin on top of let's say like an ice cube, and that coin drops to the bottom, then you know you've lost power for an extended period of time. You can't eat that food out of that freezer.
And to clarify it even better, that makes a lot of sense. To clarify it even better, because people got to remember, it may have went out. They stayed out a day and a half if you were away from the house, and then you come back, and it's froze again because the power came on.
Yep.
But you can't trust that food. I mean, I've done that, but I come back and it's like, I don't know how long this power was off.
Right. I threw mine away. I threw a whole 2 refrigerators full of food away, Eli. I wish I met you 4 or 5, 6 years ago when I threw all my food away because I did that. So that's a good tip. Again,
if it's better be safe than sorry, though. You want to mess with food safety.
Oh, no, and also, if you got, I keep, since that time I've kept, believe it or not, I always kept an ice cream bar hid in a corner because my wife said she might eat it. But I kept it hid in the corner.
Now you're telling your secrets. She gonna get you now.
Yeah, she don't listen. But I kept it hid in the corner. So if I came back and that ice cream bar is deformed, it means it got too warm in that freezer. Yada yada yada. So that's an excellent tip.
And thinking about power, another good source is JEA.com too. They've got a lot of great resources on generator safety and
I was just about to mention that.
Too. Yeah, the outage map and all that kind of fun stuff. So I recommend them checking that out too.
I'm always scary of using a generator because you hear so many sad stories of folks who had them in their home and then and they have carbon monoxide poisoning.
You got to have them outside the house. You need to test it before hurricane season starts to make sure you know how to use it, right? Mm-hmm. And to make sure that it's working properly. You want to keep it outside your house. You don't want it in a garage, right? You don't want it in a garage. You don't want it inside the house. You want to make sure that those windows are closed that are near it. Because you don't want those fumes coming in. But we see that in the hospital after storms quite a bit. People come in with that.
It's not just the fumes, too. It's just those things get really, really hot, and they become a flammable issue. That can start a fire and make it a whole lot worse.
We see that people in Honolulu like Spam.
Yeah.
Look, don't get on Spam now. Good Spam fried sandwich. Come on now, that's South Carolina right there.
Listen, girl, I'm thinking about some Vienna sausage and some sardines, all that nasty stuff. Yeah. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about hurricane preparedness. If you're not ready, it's time to get ready. As Jen said, you want to make sure that you have a gallon of water for several days per person and per animal, right? Because don't forget your fur friends. And also, if you are a special needs person or if you live in an evacuation zone, make sure you, first of all, register to go to a special needs shelter, and also go, if you have to go to a shelter, a general population shelter, and you have a pet, you need to go to the ones that allow you to bring pets. All of that information is on the City of Jacksonville's website. If you have questions of our guests, you can dial in now. Tyrone, can you put the number up? Because I don't have it in front of me. I should have it memorized. I think it's 888-669-1280. Oh, I had it right. Wow. Thank goodness I've not lost my memory. Great conversation.
So you say.
Great conversation. And again, for those of you, which many of us do, have family members who may be on oxygen, on dialysis, who have special needs, now is the time to develop a plan. Some dialysis centers, I know when my dad was living, the dialysis center actually sent home a form for him so that he, they were helping him to make preparations. But bottom line, we can't wait. And there are some folks who have dialysis at home. Dr. Kane, as a family practice physician, what advice have you given over the years to your patients who have health conditions that require equipment or, in time of a storm coming?
Well, one of the first things I always tell them is check on your medications and see how much you have available. That you need at least 2 weeks supply available, minimal. And you guys can tell me if it's anything different, but at least a 2 week supply of your medications, because you don't know when your pharmacy may open up. Don't try to rely on your physician calling in stuff at the last minute. That's why I always try to keep them up to speed in terms of getting their medicines renewed. Those that use the mailable, the mail-in, the mail ordered medications, I tell them, on this occasion, let's get it locally. Let's not wait and try to wait for a mail order. Even if it is cheaper, that's too bad. Let's just grab what's local. And most of the time, the insurance companies will allow them a couple of times a year to get things outside of the mail order medication. So I try to encourage them to get that. I always try to have patients keep an extra supply of medications anyway, at least to stay kind of a week ahead of when they need to refill. Sooner or later, they may have a little cumulative amount of about 2 to 4 weeks, which that's why I try to encourage them to get it refilled on time and not wait till the last minute. Of course, sometimes it falls on deaf ears and other times not. My concern, I think, the biggest concern I have is for those people who are on oxygen. I do tell them to try, if they are receiving supplies of O2, to try to stay at least a month in advance of oxygen, especially during hurricane season, because people deliver it to you. It's not where you can go and pick something up. So that delivery schedule may be get real busy. So try to plan ahead of time right now. Know what where again, and these, you guys have already mentioned it. Know where your shelter is at. You don't know what can be provided at that shelter. I do worry about those patients that are on dialysis and that have to go to a center. And I think one of the things that as a city we need to discuss is in terms of hurricane preparedness is at-home dialysis for patients that can't. When we shut down, the way we may have to shut down if a major hurricane hits the city, how do we help those individuals who are relying on dialysis 2 or 3 times a week?
Dr. Kate, I'll tell you, we've had those discussions, right? And so most, and I'll say most because there's only a few, dialysis centers here, they all have a disaster plan. As in, if one gets shut down, because this, like I do, if a patient misses dialysis, 2 and 3 times or 2 and 3 days later, that's very dangerous for them in a health standpoint. They're going to end up in our ED. They're going to end up possibly in ICU. So make sure, right. Yeah, because, and one of the things I always encourage dialysis patients to do is to, when they are at their dialysis provider, ask them, what is your plan? If this location is shut down, what's the plan? Because 9 times out of 10, those dialysis centers, they have a backup and they have a plan. They have to have one.
Right. And to share with patients will be very critical. Go ahead, Mr.
I was going to say, the one thing, if you have an emergency kit that's a year or 2 old, can you talk about how important it is to change out the meds? You don't have expired meds.
Expiration dates.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like who in that discussion, maybe what, kind of general overview of what to put in that emergency preparedness kit. We kind of talked about foods and knowing that we need to make sure we have plenty of food and water available. But what else should be in that kit?
So, your medications, your family disaster kit, any sort of important papers, make copies of it. Your health insurance, your house information, your insurance, any documents for your pets. You should have a flashlight in there. You should have a
Batteries.
first aid kit in there, batteries. And did you know batteries have expiration dates? So just because you've had some batteries in that old junk drawer for years, they may not work. So it's important, just like your food had expiration dates, your medication, so do some of those supplies. So it is so important that you look at those batteries and the expiration dates. I also, because of the world we live in today, I've been encouraging people to put hand sanitizer in their kits, right? And if they're a patient or a community member who is immune suppressant, very sick, put some extra mask in there that'll help them feel safe and protect them a little bit. Put some gloves in there. But there's, yes, yeah. And they have to ready their home or ready their apartment where they're staying at, right? Making sure that, back in the day, they used to tell us to put tape on the windows. Well, tape doesn't do anything, doesn't do a thing. However, if you put a mattress up against that window, or an area that could be at risk for you, that's a way to protect you. And then identify places within your home that you can shelter in place with, like, because with hurricanes come tornadoes, right? And so jumping in your bathtub is not the answer, right? Finding a central closet or room, and making sure the windows are closed, the doors are closed. Don't be taking selfies with the tornado as it goes by, right? Because there are some people out there who are doing that. But make sure, exactly, make sure that you have a designated shelter in place room in your own home.
On the first floor, if you have a 2-story.
Yeah. But, during Hurricane Michael, I talked to some folks who had a 2-level home, and the floodwaters came in and went up to their second floor, and they were in the attic, and they had to figure out a way to get out to get rescue to come and help them. And I'm going to tell you right now, when these bridges will close when the winds are 45 and above, and it's unsafe. And when fire rescue says, hey, you need to prepare, you need to evacuate, you need to get your kids together, they're not going to come out when the bridges are closed. That like they want to be safe as well, but it's unsafe for them to get out. So when you get that word to, hey, you need to evacuate, then I would evacuate to the other side of town, to a friend's house. If you have to get on the road, make sure you get on the road plenty of time.
I'd say also, when you think about the weather, early in the show, you mentioned something about how people sometimes don't take it seriously when they hear alerts coming. When you see that cone of the path of the hurricane, people need to remember that's the center of the storm, not the width of the storm.
Right.
Correct.
So, yeah, it could be a lot wider than the cone. So even though the center may have just slightly adjusted, we could still very easily be in that path.
And people get too focused on that cone. That happened down in Fort Myers last year in South Florida. They kept going, well, that's not going to come near us, and they didn't evacuate. It doesn't matter. Because Florida, we're not as wide, right? One storm, Matthew, it covered the entire state from side to side, top to bottom. So don't get focused on that. Well, it's down there, it's not going to affect us. Well, yeah, it can. You still need to have plans in place. So I always tell people, stay informed, right? Listen to the news, sign up for alerts, have your weather radio, make sure it's working, be alert, and then have a plan.
And by the way, if you need to buy something, excuse me, Dr. Kane, Florida Disaster Preparedness sales tax holidays are happening now. Starting May 27th until June 9th. So make sure that you go and stock up on some supplies. And by the way, you can visit floridarevenue.com/disaster prep for more information.
And that's tarps. You got to think about tarps, right? Tarps and rope, bungee cords. When I was deployed down there, they had 90,000 tarps they were giving out. it was gone in a couple weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know that just real quick, Eli, since you mentioned it, I think it was you. They need to put a hatchet in their attic and just leave it there, readily accessible. Because if you have to get your way out, it's going to only way you can go is the roof.
Okay.
So just leave a hatchet sitting there.
Well,
I'm a safety guy. I don't know if I can buy onto that, but okay.
I mean that's kind of scary, but have a plan. If you had to access that roof, how are you going to get out, right? So have that plan.
That's my point. If you stuck between water and the roof, how do you get out?
Dr. Kane, the hatchet man. I'm a little afraid of. I'm a little afraid of that too, Jen.
Oh no. Disaster Jen didn't say put a hatchet up there.
No, that's Dr. Kane.
In the attic. Put a hatchet in the attic.
So I was looking online and it talked about the things that you should include in a preparedness kit. Contact information for important people and care providers, a list of medicines you need, including the dosage instructions and any allergies, styles and serial numbers of all medical and assistive devices. And this is, by the way, for people with disabilities. Need to know information for first responders and others who might need to help you. And the other piece of the conversation I'd like to focus on the last few minutes of the show is after the storm.
Yeah.
What do people need to do, as far as checking on those elderly person, who live alone, for people just in general who
and mental health.
Yeah.
So after the storm, during the storm, our mental health is we're going to have a lot of anxiety and depression. But after the storm, you're going to see that as well. So it's important to check on those folks and do a check-in with yourself as well. Mental health has to be a priority because what you're going to be going through is so scary. One of the things that my family does is we designate a person in a state, because all of us live all over the country and world. And if something bad happens, we check in with that one person. And that one person, as family checks in, will go, oh yeah, Jennifer and her family, they're safe and this is where they are. So having a designated person outside the area of wherever the disaster might be is it's a good thing too.
I'd also like to try to resource 211. I don't know if we talked about that yet or not. 211 is a great resource it's a live, highly trained professional, and basically it's crisis emergency support after an event. It includes, healthcare and mental health and housing, utilities, and so
211 is amazing. Amazing.
Thank you. We have a question from one of our audience. Tyrone, if you can cue them in, that'd be great. Go ahead, LaVon.
Okay. Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
I wanted to say thank you for having this conversation. I tell you, I was in a situation where there was an issue where we didn't use the water in the tub, but fortunately, my aunt, who was a Floridian, we were in Mississippi, she had 6 months prior, when the pandemic started, to keep water. So we had like maybe 6 to 8 gallons of water. And I thought she was going over the top. But the pandemic had started, and then a storm hit Mississippi. And we could only flush the toilets because we had the gallons of water.
Yeah.
So even, and I would here really go on now, just like Dr. Kane said, and fill up the tub because of that situation. Another issue that I had was I did not know how to manually let the garage up. The electricity had been out for a week. I had to learn how to do that.
Yep.
And I'm one of those people that, I do get anxiety when a storm is hitting. Last year here in Florida, when the storm was coming, and fortunately it didn't hit the north side of Jacksonville, but I went right down that list. So I appreciate you saying make sure the batteries are now up to date. My mom went through Hurricane Dora, so she's hurricane ready every day of her life.
Good.
The tuna, and who said the yucky tuna? I believe it was you, Jocelyn. We love, not tuna, sardines. We love sardines.
I like them too. I was teasing.
Sardines not change. But I'm going to go on and get ready this year because I do have my own
Good.
home now.
Don't
So
forget the
I'm looking
porky
at that
bean.
lake.
Don't forget the
I'm looking
porky
at
Yep,
that
bean.
lake behind you. I'm looking at that lake, and when we talk
yep,
about it, I think about post storms. By the way, when lakes and
Snakes.
roads are flooded and people are walking outside, letting the children outside play in the water, that water is just not safe, right?
it's
And if
Yep.
not.
you
Nope.
Right.
always learn that if you have a cut on you and that water is contaminated, then you
Yep.
have another issue. So get you some rain
Yeah.
boots also if you can afford
Yep.
it. Put that in your
And
budget.
think about it too. So with that comes snakes.
Yes.
We saw it down in South Florida, the
Yep.
alligator farm down there, all the alligators got out. We see a lot of that. And knowing the poison control center, knowing that number, if you get bit by a snake or you have to come in or something happens, poison control or being aware of snakes is going to be a big thing to also worry about.
Okay. Well, thank you for
Thank you,
adding to my
Levon.
list. You are
She's
welcome.
like,
Thank
oh
you again.
no.
Thank you for
Take care
having this
now.
conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in.
Well, that was some good information, and glad we have one person paying attention to this conversation today, right?
Now, it's like what our guest said. A lot of people it's not going to happen to us. It's not going to happen, And Dr. Kane, I've been the brunt of many jokes because when it looks like I just look at the cone and early enough that I want to hit the road before anybody else do. So I leave plenty of time early. I may have, my daughter was living in North Carolina, so I would always run up to there when a storm come or came. But luckily, we moved her more in the center of the state here in Florida. So now that's where I probably would run off to over closer
Now,
to.
now remember, when you jump in that car, you better check those tires, check
Yep.
your oil,
Yep.
because if traffic stops and your car overheats, make sure that you have a to-go kit in your car that has food and water and even an emergency blanket.
Right. And I carry an extra, believe it or not, in that trunk, I always had 5-gallon gas tank just in case.
Okay. Lord, don't let anybody hit you.
Well, yeah, but again, I remember, I forgot which one it was, that it was such a long drive trying to either get in. I got out plenty enough time. That was not the problem. Getting back in, and then so many gas stations were closed. And so that's why I carried that extra tank with me.
There you go.
Not telling anybody
I recommend doing that. I'd worry about the fumes and all that coming out of
it. Man, Dr. Kane, you're talking about hatchets. You're talking about. I'm like, maybe I need to come over and talk to you a little bit.
Well, that's one of those guys that, again, if that's what I got to do, I figure I'd rather run than not be ready or not be prepared. But
I hear
you guys, we can be prepared and not have to worry about any of that.
Yep.
So it's been a great conversation, and we are nearing the end of the show, and it went by fast, but good information. Again, I think the message obviously is that we need to get ready and be ready just in case. I always look at it as insurance, right?
Yep.
So it's having that assurance by having your kits and having a plan. We always like to give our guests an opportunity to share their final thoughts on the topic for tonight. So Jen, I'm going to start with you. What are your final thoughts that you'd like to share with our guests as we talk about emergency preparedness and getting ready?
So quick final thoughts for me is, knowing your zone, your evacuation zone, your flood zone, having a plan in place, review that plan with all of your family members, right? And just being prepared, using the Jax Ready app, so that if, wherever you are, that app is going to tell you where your nearest shelter is, where your nearest evacuation or flood zone. And then if you have a medical special needs patient, it's important to register now during blue skies rather than the day of. But stay informed, be alert, and have a plan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good information. Eli, how about you? What are your final thoughts regarding tonight's topic?
I would say that if any family does decide to evacuate and go to a shelter, bring with them some essentials like pillows and blankets and bedding and air
Yep.
mattresses, because they won't have that at the shelter. Bring not just food, water, and meds, but also, like we said before, ID and docs, but also games and toys and books for the kids, so they can not be restless as much.
Yep.
But yeah, just to kind of plan in advance, like we said before, to it would go a long way.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you. And by the way, we're going to give that shameless plug that if you have not done so already, please go to Feeding Northeast Florida website and donate as well as volunteer, because as you heard from Eli, they give away 39 million pounds of food to
30 million.
30 million to 12 counties in the region, right? And so it's it's a lot of food. And don't worry about going cleaning out your cabinet. Just make a financial donation and let them buy the food, because they may be able to get a better deal than you do going to the grocery store. And we don't want you giving them old expired food, right? Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts for tonight's topic?
I am so appreciative of these guys coming on today. Me, the scaredy cat of hurricanes and storms, has learned quite a bit, even as a physician. I want to try and see what I can do to make sure my patients are ready. I hope other physicians that are listening also heard and adhere to some of the statements that our guests have made in terms of trying to get your patients prepared. One of the best things I picked up this evening was that website. And like I said, I downloaded it immediately because it's an excellent website. I also, another website I got, and I'm not sporting a particular channel or anything, but Channel 4 with their Hurricane Watch. And, you look and see what storms are. I even do that during non-hurricane times just to see where it may be raining or a really bad storm or what's headed that way. So it's always good to pay attention to the different information that's available to you. Because even when I was out of town, I could go back, look at the City of Jack's website, look at JEA website, see what was, what electricity was on or not on, whole 9 yards. So having those apps available. The last thing I'll say is that we didn't mention, and it probably is mentioned in the Hurricane Kit. A lot of those. Go buy one of those the battery, the rechargeable units that from Sun, that you can just get the sunlight to help charge these and keep them running after the hurricane. Those are great to have.
Solar powered.
The solar powered. That's it. To go and get the solar powered units that can recharge your cell phone and your computer as well. But go get those, because they will be immeasurable if for some reason your power is out. You can't have a much better source. Get 3 or 4 or 5 of them, just so you can have it, one for each family member. Maybe that's the other thing that you look at. So they're not that expensive. You can get them on Amazon or wherever you want to get them from. But and then this week with the tax advantage, hey, go buy it.
Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Kane. One thing that I'd like to mention, and by the way, before I mention this, to stay on it, I didn't know that it existed, but solar powered fans. We live in Florida. If you go and get a solar powered fan, then you can also have something to use in the event, because it might be 90s, 100 degrees here in Florida if the electricity goes out. And I have to mention, by the way, and thank you to our guests for giving an enormous amount of good information. Get your COVID vaccine and booster, because if you have to go to a shelter or even shelter with family members, you don't want to be exposed to other folks who may be unvaccinated and maybe they're not showing any symptoms of COVID, but you don't want to leave there with the virus. You don't want to leave with something that you didn't come there with, right? So this is also a time to remember to get your COVID vaccine
And
as well. as well as booster, as well as influenza, and thinking about those communicable diseases. We've talked about this throughout the pandemic, and we still remind people that the vaccine is still available. And yes, people are still getting COVID-19. Very important topic tonight, hurricane preparedness. Obviously, our guests are very passionate about it. For someone to call themselves Disaster Jen, that's a good indication.
Wait a minute, we didn't ask how did that come about? You forgot.
Well, I'm the disaster manager at UF Health Jacksonville. So, and my name is Jen, so they call me Disaster Jen.
And also, again, for those of you, thank you, Eli, for coming on, sharing your perspective. I heard that Eli was very passionate about this at Feeding Northeast Florida and making sure, because he mentioned all the trucks that they have on the road in getting food out on a normal daily basis. So I can only imagine after a shelter. So
Yeah.
did you have something?
Yeah, I was saying we send trucks no matter where the disaster is at. So we partner with the affiliate food banks and send supplies and people and we just make sure researchers get where they need to go.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Pause for the Truth. Tune in next week as we share another important discussion. Have a good evening and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Much appreciated.